Hey guys, hope you're doing good. Today in this video, I'm going to talk about Leetcode. What is Leetcode and how to make best use of Leetcode and why Leetcode is one of the best resource out there to prepare for coding interviews, especially if you're preparing for companies like Google, Facebook, LinkedIn, or Amazon, etc. I'll explain some strategies, tips, and tricks that worked for me when I was preparing for interviews. Based on my experience, I'm going to give some insights into like what works best for me so that it's helpful for others who are in the same situation. So what is Leetcode? If you're preparing for interviews, you may already know this, but let me explain. So Leetcode is a website that has a rich collection of interview questions, especially the algorithms and data structure problems which are asked in the coding interviews. Usually companies have 2 to 4 rounds of coding exercises, starting with the telephonic screening, which is again a coding interview. So you like it or not, you have to go through these coding interviews, especially if you are serious about working for one of these companies. I'm not getting into the discussion of whether coding interviews are meaningless or does it determine if a candidate is good or not. That's a huge debate in itself. Like even I'm not sure if that is the right approach. So what makes Leetcode really effective and stand out from other websites out there is the problems in the database are actually asked in the interviews. And also the problems are not just interview question, but each question has well crafted set of test cases. So most of the questions have like 300, 400 test cases. Also Leetcode has a code editor where you can select your language and type your code right there and also execute it and test your code against all the test cases. So this will help you not only practice solving the problem, but also think about all the possible edge cases. And more than question themselves, these test cases are what makes Leetcode really strong. So who prepares these questions and who comes up with these test cases? It's the people like you and me. So the questions in the Leetcode are actually questions asked in the interviews. So people after taking the interview, they come here and they submit the questions. So when it comes to getting better at solving these problems, the key is practice. So when you're given a problem to solve in an interview, so your brain works in two modes. So either you try to recall the solution, that is to remember the code. So other mode is problem solving mode where your brain just tries to solve the problem using the tools and techniques that it knows. It tries to identify and break the problem and solve the problem. So the first approach of trying to recall or memorize the solution always leads to disaster, because if you try to recall the solutions or remember the solutions, you can only solve problems that you have seen already. So in Leetcode itself, there are like 1400 questions. So it's impossible to memorize solutions to all these problems. So, but the good news is you don't have to memorize these solutions. So the idea is to train your brain for problem solving. And just like any other skill, you get better at it with more and more practice. And I think like Leetcode is the best place to train these skills. So how do you practice and what to practice? So in Leetcode, the problems are very well organized. Along with questions, details, and test cases, there is like a lot of other metadata. For example, it has all the list of all the companies in which this particular question has been asked, and also what are the related topics. So in Leetcode, the problems are organized based on difficulty level, whether it's a easy, medium, or hard, or related topics such as arrays, dynamic programming, trees, hash table, DFS, BFS, and most importantly, based on company. For example, all the questions asked in Google, this is the most important feature, more important than you think. So let's first talk about the difficulty level. So in Leetcode, there is like 3 difficulty level: easy, medium, and hard. First one is easy. So these are the problems I call warm-up problems. So they mainly test your basic programming and data structure skills. They are mostly straightforward. For example, parsing, sorting, searching in a hash map, these sort of basic techniques. I love these kind of problems because they help you improve your coding speed. So just because they are easy doesn't mean that they are not asked in the interviews. So you need to take these problems very seriously. So most of the telephonic screen questions are easy level problems from what I've seen. And if you can't get past the telephonic screen, that's the end of the interview game. So these are also asked in on-site as quick hitters, which means you are expected to solve these questions fairly easily so that interviewers will move on to the harder questions. So you need to take this seriously and solve these easy questions as much as possible. So also these questions will teach you the basic building blocks which you will use in the medium level questions. So now let's talk about the medium level questions. So these are the most important problems in your interview preparation period. 85 to 90% of the problem asked in the interviews are going to be medium level problems. So they are a little bit involved than easy problems. You need to know the techniques such as backtracking, graphs, memoization, dynamic programming, two-pointer approach, breadth first search, depth first search, etc. But you can learn a lot of useful techniques by spending time on these medium problems. So now let's talk about hard questions. So if you're not able to solve these hard questions, don't feel bad. There is a reason they are classified as hard problem. Usually, interviewers are told not to ask these hard questions, even for senior engineering positions. But that doesn't mean that hard questions are not asked in the interviews. So the reason is it's always a hit or miss. In 1 hour, it's not reasonable amount of time to solve these problems if you have not seen this problem already. And also it makes it harder for the hiring decision makers to decide if the candidate was bad or he just got unlucky with this problem. Very few companies encourage these kind of problems like Google, Facebook, Airbnb, Snapchat, etc. So I'll give some more data on that later. So does that mean that we can skip these problems altogether? For most companies, yes. So the best strategy is double down your effort on easy and medium problems, and only when you're feeling confident about your skills in the easy and medium problems, then you attempt the hard questions. And do not feel bad that you can't solve these problems, because most of us cannot. So this is the breakdown of problems in Leetcode. And if you look at the percentages, 51% of the questions in Leetcode are medium questions, and around 30% of the questions are easy questions, and only 21% is hard questions. So this is a rounded off percentage, so it may be off by 1. But as you can see, the easy and medium problems makes up about like 80% of all the problems in Leetcode, and hard problem makes up for only 20% of the problems. So now let's talk about strategy. Where do you start, right? So one thing I want to talk about is the topic of building the confidence. So one important issue that we need to be aware and address is confidence level and morale. Solving these problems are not fun. It drains your energy. Just like working out in a gym, you can only do like so much. After that, you will get tired. When you're solving problems, you are using brain. So you will feel stressed out. And when you feel stressed out, you get frustrated that you're not able to solve the problem, and you get demotivated. You feel like you're not good enough, good at this, or not cut out for companies like this. That's very common. But think of it this way. So if you starting to work out in a gym, do you straight away go and do deadlifts with like 300 pounds of weights? So you'll just kill yourself, right? And not go to gym anymore. You have to think of problem solving in the same way. The good news is anyone can get better at solving problems, and anyone can crack these coding interviews with enough practice and building confidence. The key is to not give up. Over time, you will build confidence. And that is the most important thing which is needed to crack these interviews. So what's the strategy here to train? You need to start with easy problems. At first, even easy problems will take some time to finish. Don't worry, you will only get better at it. So if you're a beginner, don't even look at medium or hard problems for now. One of the reasons that I like easy questions is it boosts your confidence and morale. When you feel confident about easy questions, when you are able to do it easily with like less time and less friction, you will build some confidence, and till then just stick to easy questions. And once you feel confident that you can do easy questions and you're like feeling powerful, like building confidence and everything, then go to the medium questions. And let me remind you that like when you start doing these medium problems, you will feel demotivated again, like instantly. So your brain tricks you into thinking you're not good enough, you can't solve this, etc. So your brain just tries to avoid solving these problems and feeling uncomfortable. But if you are really serious about this, then you have no other choice. You have to keep at it even if you feel uncomfortable until you start feeling comfortable with it. Again, stick to medium. Don't even think about hard. So when you pick up a medium difficulty level problem, so what you have to do is attack the problem and fight with it until you solve it. For all the questions in Leetcode, there are solutions available either on the internet or in the Leetcode itself. So there is also a discussion forum and solution section. But the key is to avoid looking at these solutions. So you have to fight with the problem. You have to try to solve this problem until you have exhausted all the options. So the reason is you can only train your brain efficiently if you try to solve it by yourself. So the minute you give up and try to look at the problem, then you're just memorizing it, which means putting your brain in a different mode. not the problem solving mode. But set a fixed time, maybe 2 hours or 3 hours per problem. And if you're not able to solve it, then you can look at the solution. Solve these problems on pen and paper. You have to go to the basics, which is like just take a pen and paper and fight with the problem and struggle with the problem. So this struggle is what teaches you a lot of things. All the coding interviews are on the whiteboard. You have to learn how to write the code without the help of any IDE. So when you write it down, so you can actually translate your ideas and thoughts about the problem in real time on the notebook. It will help you organize your thought process. So when you fight with these problems, there are some important things that you learn. One is how to take the test input, right? So for any problem, you have to come up with a test input which tests some of the different scenarios. So this particular skill is going to be the most useful in the interviews. So as an interviewer, I usually get very impressed with people if they come up with good sample input and list out some of the edge cases. So also the other important point is, as soon as you see a problem, like a medium problem or easy problem, try to find the brute force solution for it and then optimize it. For every problem, first thing you have to do is figure out what is the brute force approach will be for this problem. It's usually like easier to find than the optimized solutions. Even in the interviews, you're 50% done if you can come up with a brute force approach, a working approach, and then try to find optimal solution, because most of the time candidates fail to give an answer because they instantly try to find an optimal solution. And brute force solution is better than no solution, right? Most of the times as a candidate, we feel that if we tell the brute force solution, we'll be judged as a bad candidate, and we put unnecessary pressure on ourselves to like find the best solution right away. But that's not the case. It's the opposite. Interviewers want you to think about the brute force approach, tell that approach, and then go and find the better solution, optimize it, see where the inefficiency is. Now comes to the hard problem. So when you're going to solve the hard problems, start with an expectation that most of these problems does not have a correlation with what you have learned so far. So these hard problems are like specialized problems which people like took years to solve. So don't expect to like solve it within 1 hour if you have not seen it. So if you're not able to solve it after trying for some time, you're not alone. So these problems especially makes you feel really bad about yourself. They are very demoralizing. So do not just keep trying to get better at hard problems. You can get better at like solving easy and medium problems, but hard problems, you don't usually get better at hard problems. So do 1 or 2 problems and get back to the easy and medium problems. So you will feel better. I was very curious about like these hard problems. So I did some data analysis of which companies ask these kind of like hard questions and how important is it for the companies. So this is a graph that I came up with from the data available in the Leetcode. What this graph is showing is for each of the company, what is the breakdown of questions, like what percentage of questions are hard problems, what percentage of questions are medium problems, and what percentage is easy problem. So I have ordered them in descending order of percentage of hard problems. Pinterest, for some reason, 42% of their questions are hard questions. Again, this data has been created from the information available in the Leetcode. From what I've heard also, that like Pinterest, Snapchat, Airbnb are like the hardest interviews to crack. So I've worked in Airbnb and I can attest that like, yes, that's true. But the good news is, apart from these companies, other companies are fairly reasonable. So for example, Google has around like 23% of the questions are hard questions. Around like 80% is still easy and medium problems. Facebook, for example, they only ask around like 17% of their questions are hard level questions. So these are just like the companies which ask the most amount of hard questions, and rest of the companies, as you can see, around 15% or less a number of hard questions. So as I said, like 85% of your effort should be in getting better at easy and medium problems. So don't be in an illusion that all these companies just ask hard questions, hard level questions. That's not true. So you can double down your efforts on easy and medium problems. So now let's talk about the topics. So once you start solving more and more easy and medium problems, so you will see that most of the medium and easy problems follow few patterns. So most of the problems can be solved using few set of techniques. It can be algorithms such as sorting, backtracking, binary search, two-pointer, three-pointer approach, or it can be solved using one of the data structures like hash map, priority queues, graphs, trees, depth first search, breadth first search techniques. So as you solve more and more problems, it gets easier and easier, because once you solve a particular problem with a technique, then you know the technique. And when you solve more and more problems related to the same technique, then you get better at identifying those problems, similar problems easily. And once you know the technique very well, for example, like you are very familiar with depth first search or breadth first search, then you know all the boilerplate code, how things go, and you will feel more confident about depth first search. And also sometimes problems can be solved using multiple ways. For example, a problem can be solved by using sorting, or you can find a optimal solution using priority queues as well. So you can solve the problem with whatever technique that you know of. You get better at solving medium level problems by knowing more and more techniques and getting better at these techniques. So this is where the related topics helps a lot. So these related topics are just the techniques that you need to know. So this is the breakdown of the topics. And also one problem can be related to multiple topics. Most of the problems are associated with array, which is not surprising. Surprisingly, there is like a lot of problems on Leetcode are dynamic programming problems. So a lot of companies are obsessed with dynamic programming. Let's look at the breakdown for hard problems. What are hard problems made of? Like what topics do they cover? Not so surprisingly, most of the hard problems are dynamic programming. So now let's look at another data which gives you some information about which topics are harder than other topics. All the different topics sorted based on their difficulty. For example, like rolling hash. So first bar is a rolling hash. There are very few questions related to rolling hash, but all of them are considered hard questions. There is segment tree. I mean, you might never heard of segment tree. Then there is binary index tree. There is line sweep. These are like very unique kind of problems. So that's why most of them are hard problems. And also divide and conquer. So divide and conquer is one of these interesting topic that everyone in computer science have heard of. Divide and conquer. For example, you know what merge sort is, quick sort is, how it works. But so if you try to come up with a divide and conquer approach in an interview, good luck with that. As we saw, there are a lot of problems in dynamic programming, and as you can see, around like 50% of them are considered hard, which is not surprising, right? Dynamic programming problems are considered hard. And after that, it gets easier and easier. So this is like the continuation of the data. These are the easier topics. Also, you can see that tree and linked list problems are like the easiest ones, right? So this data should give you like some confidence and reduce your anxiety about the interviews. For example, like not all questions in Google or Facebook are hard questions. So this data in Leetcode is as close as it gets to the reality. So Leetcode is like primarily mostly used in US. So you can see that like it gives a pretty good representation of companies at least present in US, especially in Bay Area. And also they may not have enough data for companies in India. So in Leetcode, you can see the questions which are specific to the companies. I think this is the most important feature. As I said, I have interviewed with most of the top companies in Bay Area, and I can say that all the questions asked in the interviews were there in Leetcode. So that's why I said like Leetcode is like the best resource for preparing for interviews. So if you have interviews scheduled for a specific companies, then you don't have to look anywhere else. Leetcode is the place. So that was all the information that I wanted to share. I really hope that this information makes your interview preparation a little bit easier and gives you a better sense of how to prepare for the interviews and come up with a strategy. And also I want to make one thing clear. This is no way a paid endorsement for Leetcode. I am no way associated with Leetcode. So from a candidate perspective, being in the same situation of interviewing process, I feel Leetcode Premium is one of the best investment you can make for your interview preparation. So there are like a lot of free features and also premium features. I'm not going to explain what the premium features are, but I can tell one thing, that like Leetcode Premium is one of the best investment you can make for your interview preparation, hands down. So with that, all the best with your interview preparation, and talk to you guys in the next video.